Hi and welcome to this Comics Unlit walkthrough of AQA Literature Paper 1. This video is intended to give a quick overview of the paper for students studying the AQA syllabus. In the next few minutes, I'll give you a brief introduction to the paper and its content. You'll get an overview of the marking criteria so you're aware of how to approach the questions for success, and we'll look at an example of a high quality response which reveals how the marks are awarded so you can see how best to approach a question in the exam. First, let's take a look at the front of the exam paper. Candidates are also given an answer booklet to record their essay responses in. As you can see, the exam focuses on Shakespeare and a 19th century novel. This paper is from 2020, but is exactly the same format as the exam you'll sit this year. Look carefully at the instructions on the paper. You're given a total of 1 hour and 45 minutes to complete the paper. Candidates must use pens with black ink. Really importantly, you must answer one question from Section A and one question from Section B. It's also worth noting the additional 4 marks on offer for Section A for A04, which is essentially the accuracy of spelling and grammar and quality of your vocabulary and communication, but more on that later. So the paper is marked out of a total of 64, with 34 marks for Section A and a further 30 marks for Section B. Considering this, I'd recommend spending 55 minutes on Section A and 50 minutes on Section B. Okay, let's look inside the paper. At this point, you'll need to be aware of the texts you personally have studied in your class for the exam. As you can see, there are a range of texts in each section. Section A covers texts by William Shakespeare. Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet are the most popular texts covered by most schools. However, The Tempest, The Merchant of Venice, Much Ado About Nothing, and Julius Caesar are other options. It is vital you choose the text which you have studied and only this one. Sounds obvious, but every year students get mixed up and end up attempting to answer questions on texts they haven't studied. Don't let that be you. Moving on to Section B, you have to find the corresponding page for the 19th century texts, and again, choose the text you have studied at your school. Options are The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and A Christmas Carol, which are the most popular choices for many schools, but there's also Great Expectations, Jane Eyre, Frankenstein, Pride and Prejudice, or The Sign of 4. So once you've glanced at this, I'd recommend highlighting the page numbers of the specific text you've studied, before heading over to Section A to start work on your first essay. I'm going to use the example for Macbeth since that has proven to be the most popular text year on year. At the top of the page, you'll see the instructions which introduce the extract from the text. In this example, they introduce an extract from Act 5, Scene 1 of Macbeth. They inform you to read the following extract from Act 5, Scene 1 of Macbeth, and then answer the question that follows. Then follows further information based on the particular extract which has been chosen. Don't forget, the extract changes every year and it can be from any part of the text. Before reading the extract, make sure you look carefully at the question focus and the wording. Some questions use language such as explore how far, which is asking you to evaluate or weigh up the evidence and offer your opinion of a particular topic. Look at these 4 examples from previous years. 3 out of 4 questions use how far as an instruction, and 1 uses explore how Shakespeare presents, which is less focused on evaluation and more on exploring in depth the particulars of the theme or characters which are the focus. Going back to the example extract, once you've highlighted the key language in the question itself, read through your extract and select evidence which is relevant to the topic of the question. Make sure you select references which you have a confident understanding of and which connect to specific techniques which can be used to analyse in depth. Taking this example, which is the scene where Lady Macbeth sleepwalks, the quote, "What's done cannot be undone," would be a good choice since it links to the theme of guilt, showing a clear shift in character attitude from Act 1 of the play, and gives you a lot to write about. To achieve middle to high marks, you must also use evidence from elsewhere in the play. This is why it is a good idea to memorise key aspects of the plot, character details, and themes before the exam. At least one other scene should be referenced. However, it's likely to benefit your answer if you refer to multiple scenes, since it displays your expertise on the text to a greater extent and is likely to improve your marks. Once you've read through in detail and selected evidence, you should plan your essay in about 5 to 10 minutes. Some students like to mind map their ideas around the question, others create a quick paragraph outline in their essay booklet. But either way, planning is essential, especially if you're aiming for a top grade. Try to establish a big idea or thesis which links to the question, and make sure each paragraph or idea links in to this thesis. This way, your essay will make a coherent whole rather than a series of unlinked ideas. For this question, which focuses on how Lady Macbeth changes during the play, a good thesis would be exploring how Shakespeare reinforces Jacobean stereotypes about women being weaker than men through showing Lady Macbeth's change from strong and influential to weak and hopeless. So once you've completed a simple plan, you should have about 30 to 40 minutes to write your essay. Remember to keep looking back over what you've written to check you are focusing your answer on the specific question that's been asked. This brings me to the mark scheme. So both section A and B use the same mark scheme for the AQA Literature exam. There are 3 main criteria which are called assessment objectives, or AOs for short. Each objective measures a specific skill you're required to show. AO1 is worth 12 marks out of 34 for question 1. Here's the criteria in detail. AO1. Read, understand and respond to texts. Students should be able to maintain a critical style and develop an informed personal response. Use textual references, including quotations, to support and illustrate interpretations. So this essentially measures your ability to answer the question that's been asked, express your own views on the text, and back up your ideas using evidence from the text. This could be direct quotations, paraphrase, or knowledge of the plot. AO2 is also worth 12 marks out of 34. Let's look at this one in detail. AO2. Analyze the language, form, and structure used by a writer to create meanings and effects, using relevant subject terminology where appropriate. This is often the one pupils struggle with, as you need to be able to show your knowledge of particular methods a writer uses. They list language, things like similes, alliteration, metaphors, etc. Structure, which is shifts in character, order of events, etc. And form, which means the style of a text. In Macbeth's case, it's a tragedy. And you can display knowledge of any of these specific methods to obtain marks. The next mark criteria is AO3, which is worth 6 out of 34 marks. AO3 requires students to show understanding of the relationships between texts and the contexts in which they were written. Context simply refers to the environment or circumstances which affect our reading of the text. This can be details like the influence of the time it was written, or the views and attitudes of the writer, which link to the text, or things like culture or other texts which influenced it. For AO3, it is vital that the context links to the question. You will not be awarded marks if you simply show historical knowledge which is not relevant to the question at hand. Finally, AO4 is worth 4 marks out of 34 on section A only, and measures a student's use of a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with the accurate spelling and punctuation included. Essentially, make sure you write clearly and accurately with correct spelling and grammar and challenging vocabulary. Before I quickly cover section B, take a look at an example paragraph for the Macbeth question where I've highlighted the students' marks based on the AOs we've discussed. Consider the quality of this response in terms of how it covers all of the requirements on the mark scheme. Look at how the blue sections use the language of the question and form a clear opinion. Lady Macbeth is presented as a character who is ultimately overcome by guilt as a result of Macbeth's treasonous actions. Shakespeare uses her character change from a ruthless and cunning manipulator in Act 1 to a broken and hopeless figure in Act 5. Then note how AO3 context marks are obtained through a relevant link to the idea of patriarchy in to criticise the idea of women attempting to control men in the patriarchal society of medieval Scotland. The next section mainly covers AO2. Note how the student comments on the effect of repetition to explore how her character has changed. In the extract, Shakespeare emphasises this dramatic shift in her demeanour using repetition in out, damned spot, out I say. This portrays her emotions as desperate and guilt-ridden and links back ironically to her earlier claim of a little water clears us of this deed in Act 2. Reading to the end, there is a blending of analysis, context, and links to the question, which ensure this will score highly in each category. It is also possible to interpret the spot as an apparition, much like Macbeth's floating dagger, which represents the power of the supernatural in the play. By exploring the link between women and witchcraft, Shakespeare leans into the commonly held view that women were not to be trusted, and the change in Lady Macbeth's power and status essentially proves the negative consequences of women dabbling with witchcraft in order to gain power over men. Okay, so now you've got a good idea of how to approach Section A, we'll quickly cover Section B, which is pretty much the same format and requires a similar approach as Section A. So after completing your first essay in the first 55 minutes, you will turn to the relevant page of Section B. For this example, I've chosen The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, as like Macbeth, it's a popular choice for many schools. As you can see, the format is the same as Section A. There's an introduction to the extract, in this case from Chapter 10, an extract to read, and a question beneath. Don't forget, use the same process as before. Read the question, highlighting the key language which shows the specific focus. Read and annotate the extract for relevant references. Make a plan, which links in to other parts of the text. And spend roughly 10 minutes reading and planning and 40 minutes writing. So, that covers all the basic information for how to approach AQA English Literature Paper 1. Good luck if you're sitting the exam this year, and let me know if you found the information helpful.